So guys, I'll try to explain you the corticospinal tract in 5 minutes, but let's see if it takes more time. So yeah. So what really happens is this, that when we talk about the descending tracts, they are the tracts which take fibers जो impulses लेकर आते हैं from your upper part, from your brain, from your cerebral cortex all the way down to your spinal cord. All right. So what really happens is this, that imagine that this is your cerebral cortex. तो उसमें जो ये वाला एरिया होता है दैट्स योर फ्रंटल एरिया, ऑलराइट. ये ऑसिपिटल एरिया, इधर आपके पास टेम्पोरल पार्ट भी होता है. तो बिल्कुल सेंटर पे हियर यू हैव अ सर्कस एंड वी कॉल इट दैट्स, उसे कहते हैं सेंट्रल सर्कस. ऑलराइट. तो वो सेंट्रल सर्कस होता है और सेंट्रल सर्कस के आगे भी एक सर्कस होता है दैट्स कॉल्ड योर प्री सेंट्रल सर्कस बिकॉज दैट्स प्रेजेंट अहेड ऑफ योर सेंट्रल सर्कस. एंड देयर इज अ सर्कस present behind your central sulcus, that's your post central sulcus. All right. So the in between the central sulcus and the precentral sulcus there is an elevation, and that elevation is known as your precentral gyrus. And in between your central sulcus and your post central sulcus, that elevation is known as the post central gyrus. So this is it. And then you also have a superior frontal sulcus, and there is, you have an inferior frontal sulcus. So in between your, so on top of your superior frontal sulcus you have your superior frontal gyrus, and on top of your, in between your superior frontal and inferior frontal sulcus you have your middle frontal gyrus, and below your inferior frontal sulcus you have your inferior frontal gyrus. All right. So these were the main areas, and then this is a bit of your physio part that all right. So ahead of your central sulcus and in between your central sulcus and your precentral sulcus, that area is known as motor area. So this is the primary, so that area is known as, sorry, the primary motor cortex. So this is your primary motor cortex. This is the point where all your which is responsible for your motor pathways, which is, and one of that is the corticospinal tract. And then ahead of it there is a supplementary motor area. I'm talking about this part. All right. So here you have your primary motor cortex, and then here you have your supplementary area. So this is that supplementary area that I'm talking about, that you call it, that's your secondary motor cortex. So this one, the black, is your primary motor cortex. This all is your secondary motor cortex. Secondary motor cortex has further divided into like two parts, the supplementary motor area and the premotor area. So guys, one thing that I have to clear, it's drawn wrong. The supplementary motor area is present inferiorly and your premotor area is present superiorly. Premotor area is responsible for all the planning, and your supplementary motor area is responsible for the primitive movements. So when we talk about the fibers which are coming from the cerebral cortex, so what happens is the fibers come from your cerebral cortex, all the way down to your spinal cord. All right. All the way down to your spinal cord. So these are the motor fibers. So basically what happens is this, that 30% of the fibers, they're coming from your primary motor cortex, this area. All right. And another the 30%, they're coming from your secondary motor cortex, which is formed by your supplementary and your premotor area. So that form gives up your 2 by 3 of your fibers. So all these fibers, they are basically coming from, which is ahead of your precentral, like in between your precentral sulcus and your central sulcus, the precentral gyrus. So this part provides 60% of the fibers, whereas the rest 40% is provided by the sensory area, which is behind your central sulcus, and that is the post central gyrus, and that's all responsible for your sensory part. So that gives your fibers to the for the descending tracts. All right. So all these fibers, when we talk about from the cerebral cortex, it has 6 layers of neurons. So these fibers, they're coming from your fifth layer. It's a fifth layer from which the which has like the corticospinal tract starts from the cell bodies of the motor neurons, which are present in the fifth layer of your cerebral cortex. And then in your when we talk about the cerebral cortex, it has there you have cell bodies, and these cell bodies, they take message all the way down to the spinal cord. So a, a few of these cell bodies, they're really thickened, so there we have your normal cell bodies, and then you also have your cells of Betz. Now I'll be telling you what's the difference between cells of Betz and the other ones. So the cells of Betz, they are the large neurons, and they're like the large cell bodies. And what do they do is this, that their axons, they are really thick and they're highly myelinated axons, whereas others, they're not that heavily myelinated, and they directly end on the lower motor neurons, which goes to the muscles. And cells of Betz are very less in number, whereas other, they're more in number. And the other ones, they have their connecting neurons, so basically they have the internuncial neurons. So cells of Betz, because they're heavily myelinated, they're fast, they have high velocity, whereas other ones are slow. All right, so yeah, so these information, it's coming from your cells of Betz. These are your corona radiata. These corona radiata, they fan down and they go to your so you have your internal capsule. Internal capsule has two limbs, anterior limb and posterior limb. So they go to the posterior limb, and here they all are like coming together. So this is a point, because all these fibers are all together. So this, if there is an injury here, so it's gonna cause a very severe, loss of sensation and a very great problems. So this is the cerebral cortex, the midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, spinal cord, guys. So we were talking about these, the coronary radiata, they come to your posterior limb, and they come to your internal capsule ka posterior limb wala part, and then they ascend downwards, and then they come to the midbrain. Now the thing is that midbrain, when we talk about the midbrain, so midbrain has like parts. So the anterior most part is known as the crus cerebri. Then you have your, like, I'm going from anterior to posterior. So anterior is crus cerebri, then you have tegmentum, and then the most posterior is tectum. All right, tectum is the part, let's not talk about the tectum and tegmentum, we are concerned with the crus cerebri part. So crus cerebri, if we divide the crus cerebri into 5 equal parts, so the 3/5, which is the 3/5 central 3/5 part, this is the part from where the corticospinal tract fibers, they descend downwards. So they descend downwards from the 3/5 part, from the central 3/5 part of the midbrain. All right, from the crus cerebri, they go down, they go to the pons. In there, in the pons, you have, in the base of the pons, you have your pontine nuclei. So they all go to the pontine nuclei, because what happens is that because pontine nuclei, they're present very dispersely. So these fibers, they get dispersed when in the pons, because of the presence of pontine nuclei. And then a few of the fibers, they go from your pons into your cerebellum, and they go through the middle cerebellum peduncle. The fibers are coming, which connect cerebellum and midbrain, superior cerebellar peduncles. Between pons and cerebellum, you have your middle cerebellar peduncles, which connects pons and medulla and cerebellum, and medulla and cerebellum would be inferior cerebellar peduncles. So the fibers, they go from the pons into the cerebellum through the middle cerebellar peduncles. Then they go to the medulla oblongata. What happens is that here pyramids are formed in the medulla oblongata, and so it forms kind of like a pyramid. And then what happens is this, that 90% of the fibers, they cross over. So the 90% of the corticospinal fibers, or the pyramidal tract, because in the medulla oblongata pyramids are formed, that is why we call the corticospinal tract as pyramidal tract. It's known as corticospinal because it's coming from your cortex and ending to the spinal cord. So corticospinal and pyramidal tract, because pyramids are formed in the medulla oblongata. So 90% of the fibers, as you can see, what happened to them is this, that they decussate. So they cross over. 90% of the fibers come to the opposite side, and the right ones coming to the left side, the left ones coming to the right side. So here the decussation takes place. So the fibers that are decussated, they move more like laterally. They go to the lateral horn, a lateral part of your white matter, and you call them the lateral corticospinal tract. Lateral because they're coming to the lateral part of your white matter, corticospinal because they're coming all the way from your cortex ending to the spinal cord. And so these were the 90% of the fibers which decussate. But then you have your 10% fibers which does not decussate. They move straight away and they end to the anterior white matter of your spinal cord, and that is your anterior corticospinal tract. So this is it, And then there's a few things that I would like to highlight more, which is this, that yeah, so you have your anterior and your lateral. So your lateral ones, they are responsible for the fine movements of hands, and your anterior ones, they are responsible for the muscles of the axial part, thorax and the trunk. So here I've written of the anterior, and here I've written of the lateral. All right, so the anterior ones, they cross green matter spinal cord, and they make, oh guys, ignore the noise. So yeah, so you're done with the motor functions, and that's it. So these are the written notes. If you feel like going through it, you may read it. And yeah, that's it. So another thing that I had to tell you, that when these fibers, they pass from your medulla oblongata and form pyramids, they go in the pyramidal area of the medulla oblongata. So, and that is where, the pyramids are formed. So this is it. And then another thing, clinical importance, is this, that after this pyramids, there is a decussation which takes place. All right, the same drawing I've made here. So these are the pyramids, and then these pyramids, they cross over, which forms the lateral corticospinal tract. If they did not cross over and they move straight away, it is going to form your anterior corticospinal tract. So the lateral ones which decussate, if let's say if I cut this side, all right, if there is a problem here, which now the question is, which part of your body would be affected? These fibers, they're present. I cut the left part of the fibers, these, all right, so these fibers, but the thing is that they decussate and they move downwards to the right side. So the problem would be on the right side of the body, even though I've cut the left side fibers. So it means that the contralateral side, the opposite part of your body, would be affected, and there is going to be the loss of motor control. But if I cut a point after so before decussation, if you cut a point, the fibers are going to decussate, and it is going to bring an effect to the opposite side of your body. But if there's a lesion after decussation, then these fibers, if I cut like the right here, if let's say if I cut this part, so if I cut the right part, left part, which is decussated, so these fibers, they are going down to the left part, so the left part of your body would be affected. So it means that there would be an ipsilateral side of the part would be damaged. So I'll make sure to add in the notes. And yeah, so another thing is the order of neurons. So the first order of neurons is in your cerebral cortex. The second order of neuron is your internuncial neurons, which are present in the anterior gray horn, and the third order neuron are the lower motor neurons, which innervate the skeletal muscle. So I'll make sure to add the notes, and thank you so much for listening.